everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of two lead faculty for modern management of the older adult. I teach with Dustin Jones. And today, I thought that we could build a little bit on some of the content and information that Morgan Denny had shared yesterday. I am usually not a person who is nervous about getting on to the podcast, but I definitely can feel myself being a little bit nervous having these conversations. And I think the reason for that is that I do not feel like an expert by any means in issues around racial disparity and especially how it impacts our healthcare system. But I have been taking the last couple of days to try and educate myself. And I think that using this podcast and having this platform as a faculty member, and I'm pretty sure I can mirror the sentiment of a lot of faculty members right now, is that this is a platform that we can use to try and help spread the message in a very positive way. So I am going to apologize in advance if I do not say the right thing, because I am learning, just like a lot of people who are white are learning the correct way to communicate and have these discussions respectfully and be an ally for people of color. And so I'm going to apologize in advance if I say something incorrectly, but I think it's an important conversation. And based on a lot of the education that we're receiving as people who are experiencing white privilege, I think it's important for us to be having these conversations as much as it is for people of color to be advocating for the changes in the system that we would like to see. And before I start talking about this, I also want to acknowledge that I am a white woman of privilege, and I cannot really understand some of the downstream implications of discrimination in the healthcare system. I am also a Canadian, and therefore I am just seeing some of the literature on the American healthcare system, but I am not intricately involved in the US system. I have some insights obviously from our Canadian systems, and we have some of the same issues that are coming to light in the US and Canada as well. And we're having a lot of conversations around being less racially biased in our healthcare system as well here. But I just kind of wanted to make those two disclaimers before we started talking about some of these issues. And Morgan yesterday had kind of alluded to the fact that oftentimes physical therapists, we really do try and stay away from social justice issues and political issues. And I think the reason why we do that is to try to give a sense of neutrality and to try and just focus on the care of our client. And I would agree with that as well, that that probably is where some of my silence has come from. But the more and more research that I'm looking into, the more and more I think that it's a good thing for us to be aware of some of the disparities that are happening based on systemic racial bias, but also some of the differences from a genetic perspective that are underlying for individuals who are coming from different races. And what that is going to do is it's going to allow us to customize our healthcare so that we are able to know some of the underlying risk factors for individuals in different racial backgrounds and potentially change our course of care to allow ourselves to appropriately care for those individuals. And so you're going to see me looking at my computer because I want to make sure that I get the statistics correct. And I hope that this podcast is just going to start a conversation around how we as PTs can see some of these disparities happening and how we can try and work to ameliorate some of those systemic issues. So the first thing that I thought was extremely surprising is around the risk for cardiovascular disease and multimorbidity. So there was a study that was published from a large epidemiological study in the US just last year, and it said by age 50, there is a 40% increased risk of multimorbidity for persons who are Black compared to those who are white. And what they were making, the conclusion of this study that they were making was that individuals of color develop chronic disease earlier than individuals who are non-Hispanic white and individuals who are Hispanic. And that made me reflect a lot about why individuals of color may be experiencing chronic disease earlier in their life. And what I think that the general conclusion has been is that there are a combination of factors that are coming into play. And so part of it is a system-wide racial bias, where individuals who are Black are more likely to experience racial discrimination when they are interacting with our healthcare system. As a consequence of that, they are less likely to decide to seek out preventative healthcare resources. So when it comes to things like multimorbidity, especially things like cardiovascular disease, we do know that there are a lot of preventative things that we can do in regards to counseling, screening for things like hypertension, so that they can be put on a medication that can help manage their blood pressure, or be counseled on lifestyle related issues before something like a heart attack happens. But if your perception going into the healthcare system, or your experience in the past, is that you're going to be met with racial discrimination, or you feel like the quality of your care isn't going to be as good when you go into those interactions, you're more likely to avoid them. So what we're seeing is that individuals who are Black and are trying to interact with our healthcare system, if that racial discrimination is there, they may not seek out that care. And as a consequence of that, we are seeing that 65% of Black men between the ages of 40 and 79, so 65%, that's a huge number, are considered to be at a high risk for a heart attack in the next 10 years. And cardiovascular disease, underlying cardiovascular disease, is a huge issue that is coming into the Black community, and their numbers are much higher than individuals who are white or Hispanic. And there are, again, a lot of issues relating to that. What we also are starting to see is that individuals who are Black may have more of a genetic predisposition to cardiovascular disease. You're going to hear me talking on Friday around maternal death rates in Black women versus white women, and one of the things that is happening is cardiovascular events related to labor and delivery. And as there are obviously the systemic issues that are going on, but we also are seeing this genetic predisposition that, from the system's perspective, is making me really think that those types of that education, knowing that we are seeing individuals who are Black having that increased risk of cardiovascular disease, may need a different care pathway than somebody who is white. They may need to be screened earlier. They may need to be screened more often. They may need to be have a little bit more of a deep dive into their family history to see, when were some of these cardiovascular events happening. If we think that for somebody who is white, that these events are happening in their 50s and 60s, and therefore we're going to start screening in their 40s, if what we find out based on more research is that an individual who is Black may be experiencing these events in their 40s, and therefore we need to start screening in their 30s. And so some of this research that is not new, that has been around for a long time, is something that we can use as a catalyst to spark change in our care pathways in order for us to be providing the quality of care that we would like to see across North America. And what I think is a big issue in our healthcare system, and race is one of these really strong factors, is around some of the social determinants of health. If you have been working in the geriatric space, you know that social determinants of health have a huge, huge influence on a person's physical and mental health, their emotional health, and their ability to access resources. And race is one of those social determinants of health. And what we're starting to see is that, especially when race interacts with low socioeconomic status and lower education levels, then what we're seeing is that racial discrimination numbers are going higher. So that interaction term in terms of our statistical modeling is showing that the more of those social determinants are present in an individual, the more likely they are to experience racial discrimination in our healthcare system. And they're less likely to have access to healthcare resources. They're more likely to seek, or less likely to seek care, and their health-related outcomes are definitely much poorer as a consequence. And so what we know in terms of looking at racial privilege and racial discrimination in healthcare systems based on some of the research that we know now is that racial discrimination in healthcare has been linked to a variety of adverse health outcomes. So again, reduced use of preventative healthcare services, poor self-reported health, negative outcomes of cardiovascular disease, and low birth weight. And the negative outcomes of cardiovascular disease that I feel is very pertinent to individuals who are working in the geriatric space is that individuals who are Black are more likely to have a fatal heart attack or cardiovascular incident compared to somebody who is white. And again, there's a whole slew of issues that are really feeding into that would require hours and hours of discussion. But I wanted to use this podcast to spark this discussion, to see how you guys are feeling in regards to your interactions with people of color and some of the maybe the issues that they have brought up to you in regards to care or their motivation to seek care, what may be detracting from their capacity or their desire to enter into the healthcare system, and what have some of your interactions been. I think that in regards to some of the conversations that are being sparked, I think it has been a strong catalyst for us to be having these discussions. And as a healthcare provider, trying to circle these conversations for myself around some of the things that I'm seeing in the day-to-day care of my clients, the healthcare system that I am involved with, and those conversations to show that we are not immune to some of these issues as much as we're oftentimes the conversation is around policing. There are other systemic injustices that are happening in our healthcare system that we need to make sure that we are having conversations about. And so that is my podcast for today. Just to kind of summarize, what we know is that there are racial disparities in regards to chronic disease accumulation for individuals who are Black compared to those who are white or Hispanic. We know that individuals who are Black are more likely to have earlier onset of chronic disease, which is showing itself in regards to multimorbidity. So more than one chronic disease happening by the age of 50, you're 40% more likely to have multimorbidity. We are seeing that individuals who are Black are more likely to experience fatal outcomes as a result of a cardiovascular incident, and therefore something that we need to be addressing. The reason for this is multifaceted. So we're seeing system-wide racial bias in our healthcare systems. We are seeing racial discrimination leading to a reduction in use of preventative healthcare services and a reduction in access to resources. And so these types of conversations, I think, are going to be extremely important to be having over the next months and years. And we're going to need to have to be strong advocates for our clients of all colors in order for us to be the providers that we, I think, really want to be. All right. I hope I did okay. I am going to keep having these conversations until I don't feel uncomfortable anymore having them. If you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, I would love to hear it. I'm here to learn just as much as you guys are here to learn. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.